In the small town of Zaragoza, Spain, where life goes on with an almost bucolic tranquility, a story unfolds that would shock its inhabitants. The city, known for its rich history and medieval architecture, would become the setting for a family drama that would culminate in an unimaginable tragedy. Juan Martinez, a 35-year-old man, was a respected history teacher at the secondary school of Zaragoza. Known for his charisma and his passion for teaching, Juan was loved by his students and colleagues alike. He had been born and raised in Zaragoza, and his life seemed to be headed towards complete happiness. However, behind his facade of an exemplary man, Juan hid a secret that would soon come to light. Maria Lopez, 32, was a successful lawyer at one of the most prestigious law firms in Zaragoza. Intelligent, ambitious, and dedicated to her work, Maria had managed to balance her career with her family life. Married to Juan for 5 years, the couple seemed to have it all: a cozy house on the outskirts of the city, a seemingly solid relationship, and a promising future. However, the arrival of a new member to the family would change everything. Carmen Rodriguez, 55, was Maria's mother. Widowed for a decade, Carmen had decided to move to Zaragoza to be closer to her only daughter. Attractive and with a magnetic personality, Carmen had a presence that was hard to ignore. Her arrival at Maria and Juan's home in October 2023 would mark the beginning of a series of events that would trigger a tragedy. From the moment Carmen set foot in Maria and Juan's house, the tension in the air was palpable. Juan, always polite and kind, felt uncomfortable with his mother-in-law's presence. Carmen, for her part, seemed to enjoy the discomfort she caused. The furtive glances and subtle comments began to become more and more frequent, creating an atmosphere of sexual tension that neither of them could ignore. One night in November 2023, Maria received an emergency call from her law firm. An important case required her immediate attention, and she was due to travel to Madrid that same night. Juan, although concerned, understood the importance of his wife's work and supported her in her decision. However, Maria's absence left Juan and Carmen alone in the house, a situation neither of them had anticipated. That night, as Juan was preparing dinner, Carmen approached him in the kitchen. The conversation started innocently enough, talking about Maria's life and Juan's accomplishments. However, as the night progressed, the words became more intimate and the gazes more intense. Juan, unable to resist the attraction he felt, found himself getting closer and closer to Carmen. "Juan, you are an amazing man," Carmen said, her voice soft and seductive. "Maria is very lucky to have you." Juan, nervous but unable to look away, replied, "Thank you, Carmen. Maria is an extraordinary woman." Carmen moved even closer, her hand gently brushing Juan's arm. "Yes, he is. But sometimes I wonder if he really appreciates what he has." The tension in the air was palpable. Juan, feeling a mix of guilt and desire, couldn't help but be drawn to the intensity of the moment. However, the arrival of a phone call interrupted the encounter, bringing them back to reality. In the days that followed, the tension between Juan and Carmen continued to grow. Every interaction, every glance, seemed charged with a hidden meaning. Juan, consumed by guilt, tried to keep his distance, but the attraction was too strong. Carmen, for her part, seemed to enjoy the game, knowing she was in control of the situation. One afternoon, while Juan was marking papers in his study, Carmen walked in unannounced. "Juan, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice firm but gentle. Juan looked up, surprised. "Of course, Carmen. What's wrong?" Carmen sat across from him, her eyes locked on his. "I know you feel the same way I do, Juan. We can't ignore this any longer." Juan, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement, could not find the words to respond. The situation was reaching a critical point, and they both knew it. One night in December 2023, while Maria was away on another business trip, Juan and Carmen found themselves alone again. Tensions had reached a peak, and they both knew they couldn't ignore their feelings any longer. "Juan, we can't go on like this," Carmen said, her voice shaking slightly. "We need to talk about this." Juan, feeling a mixture of guilt and desire, nodded. "I know, Carmen. But I don't know what to do." Carmen moved closer to him, her hand gently brushing his cheek. "Just let go, Juan. We can't keep fighting this." At that moment, Juan and Carmen crossed a line from which there was no turning back. Passion and desire took control, and they both gave in to their feelings, without thinking about the consequences. Carmen's arrival in Juan and Maria's lives had set off a series of events that would change their lives forever. The sexual tension between Juan and Carmen had reached a critical point, and both had crossed a line from which there was no turning back. However, what neither of them knew was that their actions would have devastating consequences. The morning after that fateful night in December 2023, Juan woke up with a sense of guilt and confusion consuming him. He looked to his side and saw Carmen, still asleep, her serene face contrasting with a whirlwind of emotions he felt inside. He got up stealthily, trying not to wake her, and went to the kitchen. As he made coffee, his mind kept going over the events of the previous night. How had he gotten to this point? How could he have betrayed Maria like that? Despite his guilt, Juan tried to maintain his daily routine. He got dressed and prepared to go to school, where his students were waiting for him. As he drove through the streets of Zaragoza, the city he had always loved, he felt like a stranger in his own life. Upon arriving at school, his colleagues noticed his distant attitude, but no one dared to ask. Juan, always so jovial and approachable, seemed to be in another world. Maria returned from her business trip that same afternoon. Upon entering the house, she found her mother and husband in the living room, both trying to act normal. Maria, oblivious to what had happened, told them about her trip and the cases she had handled. Juan and Carmen listened, their eyes avoiding meeting, the weight of their shared secret weighing on them. In the following days, Juan and Carmen tried to keep their relationship a secret. Every time Maria left the house, whether for work or some other reason, they took the opportunity to be together. The guilt and fear of being discovered were constant, but the attraction and desire were stronger. They met in hidden corners of the house, in stolen moments, always with the fear of being discovered. Life in the small town of Zaragoza continued on its course. Juan, a middle-aged man, continued to teach literature at the local high school. His passion for teaching was undeniable, but his heart harbored internal conflicts that he rarely showed to his students. Maria, his wife, continued her successful career at the law firm, working tirelessly to maintain a balance between her professional and personal life. Carmen, Maria's mother, had been living with them for some years, after her mother's health began to decline. She took care of the housework, taking care of the house and the food, always with a kind smile, but with an air that revealed the melancholy of someone who saw how the years passed without being able to do much to change her situation. From the outside, everything seemed normal. Each one's daily routine went on without neighbors or even close friends suspecting that anything was wrong. However, within the walls of their home, the tension and secrecy were palpable. Juan and Carmen lived on a constant emotional roller coaster, oscillating between guilt and desire, a relationship marked by furtive glances and stolen moments in the hallways of the house. Despite the emotional distance he maintained with Maria, both knew that their bond was dangerous, but neither of them found the strength to stop. The weight of the forbidden clung to them, but each encounter seemed to confirm what neither of them wanted to admit. The desire they shared was deeper and more complicated than they could have imagined at first. They both knew that the life they led could not last much longer without something catastrophic happening. But in the silence of the night, between the shadows of the house, the words that were never said continued to resonate with an unstoppable force. One day in January 2024, Juan and Carmen decided to meet at Parque Grande José Antonio Labordeta, a public place where they could go unnoticed in the crowd. They sat on a bench, surrounded by families and children playing, and talked about their situation. "Juan, we can't go on like this," Carmen said, her voice filled with concern. "Maria doesn't deserve this." Juan nodded, his gaze lost in the horizon. "I know, Carmen. But I don't know how to stop it. I don't know how to stop feeling what I feel." Carmen took his hand, their fingers interlacing. "Me neither, Juan. But we have to think about Maria. We have to find a way to stop this before it's too late." That night, as the shadows lengthened along the walls of the house, Juan and Carmen found themselves in the kitchen, far from Maria's prying eyes. The silence between them was heavy with the feelings and thoughts they had both been holding in for so long. Finally, it was Juan who broke the silence with a low but firm whisper. "We have to end this, Carmen," he said, his voice empty of all emotion. "For Maria, for ourselves. We can't go on like this. It's the right thing to do, even if it hurts." Carmen, her gaze fixed on the floor, nodded slowly, knowing that the decision had been hanging in the air for days, weeks perhaps. There was no turning back. Guilt had weighed on her for so long, and although desire was still alive in her heart, reason now took over. "Yes, I know," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "It's what's best for everyone." We can't go on like this. I promise you that I'll try, Juan. I'll do everything I can to stay away from you, at least until we get a handle on what we feel." There was a determination in his words, though sadness was evident in his eyes. They both knew it was a difficult promise to keep. The chemistry between them was undeniable, and though their relationship had been brief, its intensity had left a deep mark on both of them. However, the need to protect Maria, their daughter, from even greater pain drove them to take this step. They agreed that there would be no more physical or emotional contact, that they would rebuild their lives separately. They pledged to keep their distance, hoping to find peace of mind. Although their hearts were still entangled in a tangle of feelings, the decision had been made. The weight of guilt and regret would accompany them in their daily lives, but they knew that the truth, although painful, would free them. In the weeks that followed, Juan and Carmen made a conscious effort to avoid each other. Juan immersed himself in his work, spending more time at school and less time at home. Carmen, for her part, took care of the housework and avoided being alone with Juan. Maria, oblivious to everything, continued with her daily routine, not noticing the change in her husband and mother's behavior. One evening in February 2024, Maria decided to host a family dinner. She wanted to celebrate the success of an important case she had won and thought it would be a good opportunity for everyone to spend time together. Juan and Carmen, although nervous, accepted the invitation. The dinner went smoothly, the conversation flowing easily. However, the underlying tension was palpable. After dinner, while Maria was clearing the table, Juan and Carmen found themselves alone in the kitchen. The proximity and intimacy of the moment was too much for them. Despite their best intentions, they found themselves embracing, their lips meeting in a passionate kiss. It was a moment of weakness, a reminder that despite their efforts, their feelings were still strong. The reality of their situation hit them hard. They knew they couldn't go on like this, that their relationship was destroying not only their lives, but Maria's as well. They decided they had to take drastic measures to end their relationship once and for all. Juan decided to seek advice from a close friend, Pedro, a co-worker at the institute. Pedro, always willing to listen, was shocked to hear Juan's confession. However, he did not judge him. Instead, he offered his support and suggested that he seek professional help. Juan, desperate for a solution, took Pedro's advice and decided to seek a therapist. Juan began attending therapy sessions with Dr. Garcia, a renowned psychologist in Zaragoza. In his sessions, Juan spoke openly about his feelings, his guilt, and his fear. Dr. Garcia offered him tools and strategies to manage his emotions and helped him understand the complexity of his situation. Juan, although still struggling, began to feel some relief. While Juan was attending therapy, Carmen also took steps to distance herself. She decided to spend more time outside the house, visiting friends and family in other parts of the city. The physical distance helped ease the tension, but the attraction was still there. One night in March 2024, Juan and Carmen found themselves alone in the house again. Maria had gone out to a work meeting, and the temptation to be together was too strong. However, this time, they both knew they couldn't give in. They sat in the living room, talking openly about their feelings and their fears. "Juan, we can't keep doing this," Carmen said, her voice firm but gentle. "We have to put an end to this, for everyone's sake." Juan nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I know, Carmen, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen." That night, Juan and Carmen made a final decision. They agreed that Carmen would move out of the house, at least temporarily, to give everyone the space they needed. Carmen decided to move in with a close friend, while Juan and Maria tried to rebuild their relationship. The next morning, Carmen packed her things and prepared to leave. Maria, although surprised, understood her mother's need for her own space. Juan, for his part, felt relieved and sad at the same time. He knew it was the right thing to do, but he also knew he would miss Carmen. With Carmen out of the house, Juan and Maria began the process of rebuilding their relationship. Juan, with the help of therapy, began to open up more to Maria, sharing his feelings and fears. Maria, although confused at first, began to understand the complexity of the situation and committed to working on their relationship. However, peace would not last long. One night in April 2024, while Maria was going through some papers in Juan's study, she found a letter. It was a letter from Carmen, addressed to Juan, confessing her feelings and her guilt. Maria, in a state of shock, could not believe what she was reading. Her world fell apart in an instant. Maria confronted Juan that same night. Her voice shook with anger and pain as she showed him the letter. Juan, unable to deny the truth, confessed everything. He told her about his relationship with Carmen, about the guilt and fear, about his attempts to end it all. Maria, devastated, couldn't believe what she was hearing. The confrontation ended in a breakup. Maria, unable to forgive the betrayal, decided she could no longer live with Juan. She packed her things and moved into a hotel, needing time and space to process everything that had happened. Juan, devastated, was left alone in the house, facing the consequences of his actions. Carmen, unaware of what had happened, received a call from Maria that same night. Maria, her voice full of pain, told her everything. Carmen, devastated, could not believe that her letter had been discovered. She felt guilty and responsible for the pain she had caused her daughter. In the days that followed, Juan, Maria, and Carmen reflected on their actions and the consequences of their decisions. Each, in their own way, tried to find a way to move forward. However, the damage had already been done, and the wounds were deep. One night in May 2024, Maria, consumed by grief and anger, made a decision that would change their lives forever. She decided she could no longer live with the weight of betrayal. Her mind, clouded by grief, began to plan a revenge that no one could have anticipated. The forbidden relationship between Juan and Carmen had come to an end, but the consequences of their actions were devastating. Maria, devastated by the betrayal, made a decision that would change their lives forever. Tragedy was about to unfold, and no one could stop it. May 2024 was a month of reflection and pain for Maria. Juan and his mother's betrayal had left her devastated, and her mind was consumed by dark thoughts. Anger and pain mixed in a whirlwind of emotions that brought her to the brink of madness. Maria, a woman who had always been rational and controlled, now found herself in a state of desperation that drove her to take drastic measures. One night, while alone in her hotel room, Maria began to plan her revenge. Her mind, clouded by grief, began to plot a plan that would allow her to punish Juan and his mother for their betrayal. She knew she could not continue to live with the weight of the betrayal, and her desire for revenge became an obsession. Maria began researching methods to carry out her plan. She spent hours on the internet, looking up information about poisons, weapons, and assassination techniques. Her once clear and logical mind was now consumed by dark, violent thoughts. She knew what she was planning was illegal and morally wrong, but her pain and anger were stronger than any sense of morality. One afternoon, Maria visited a gardening supply store on the outskirts of Zaragoza. There, she purchased a potent poison, making sure it would leave no trace. She also acquired a sharp knife, which she carefully hid in her bag. Her plan was taking shape, and every step she took brought her closer to her goal. Maria decided that the perfect time to carry out her plan would be during a family dinner. She knew that Juan and his mother wouldn't suspect anything, and that the opportunity to be together would be ideal for her revenge. She invited Juan and his mother to dinner at her house, making sure that everything seemed normal. On the night of the dinner, Maria prepared everything carefully. She cooked Juan and his mother's favorite dishes, making sure everything was perfect. As she cooked, her mind went over every detail of her plan, making sure nothing went wrong. Juan and Carmen arrived at Maria's house on time. The atmosphere was tense, but everyone tried to act normal. Maria served dinner, and everyone sat down at the table. The conversation was forced, but Maria made sure everything seemed as normal as possible. As they ate, Maria watched Juan and his mother closely. She knew this would be the perfect moment to carry out her plan. With a forced smile, Maria got up from the table and headed to the kitchen, where she had hidden the poison. Maria returned to the table with a bottle of wine, which she had carefully mixed with the poison. It wasn't a large amount, but it was enough to ensure that the poison would take effect without raising suspicion. The dark red liquid glowed in the dim light of the lamp, like a silent warning of what was about to happen. With an eerie calm, she began to pour the wine, filling Juan and his mother's glasses, her hand shaking slightly as she did so. She wanted them to drink enough, just enough for the poison to begin working without them suspecting anything. As she watched Juan and his mother drink the wine, Maria felt a mix of conflicting emotions wash over her. On one hand, there was a dark satisfaction, almost a sense of power, as she watched her parents accept the glass without question. It seemed as if, at last, she was taking control of a situation that had been out of her reach for so long. The thought of revenge, of making them pay for the pain they had caused her, for the betrayal of her mother and her husband, had consumed her mind for the past few weeks. She had planned this moment meticulously, making sure the poison was undetectable, that it all looked like an accident, leaving no trace. But at the same time, Maria couldn't ignore the weight of guilt that crushed her. Every sip her parents took brought her closer to a limit from which she could no longer turn back. She knew that what she was doing was irreversible, that there would be no turning back. However, the rage and pain of the humiliation she had suffered had blinded her. The desire for revenge, to see them suffer as she had suffered, was stronger than any remorse. As the dinner progressed, Juan and Carmen began to feel ill. The poison was taking effect, and they both began to experience symptoms of poisoning. Maria, watching closely, made sure that everything was going according to her plan. Juan, feeling an intense pain in his stomach, got up from the table and went to the bathroom. Carmen, for her part, began to feel dizzy and weak. Maria, with a sinister smile, watched how her plan was developing. Maria followed Juan into the bathroom, where she found him doubled over in pain. With a knife in her hand, Maria approached Juan, her gaze filled with anger and pain. Juan, seeing the knife, tried to defend himself, but the poison had weakened him too much. "Mary, what are you doing?" Juan asked, his voice weak and shaky. Mary, with tears in her eyes, replied, "I am doing what you and my mother forced me to do. I am putting an end to this betrayal." Juan, unable to defend himself, fell to the ground, his body convulsing from the effect of the poison. Maria, with a knife in her hand, approached him and, with a quick movement, stabbed him. Juan's cry of pain echoed through the house, but Maria did not stop. Her desire for revenge was stronger than any feeling of guilt. Juan, mortally wounded, fell to the ground, his body motionless. Maria, with tears in her eyes, looked at her husband's lifeless body. She knew that what she had done was irreversible, but her pain and anger were stronger than any feeling of guilt. Maria returned to the living room, where she found her mother, Carmen, unconscious on the floor. The poison had taken effect, and Carmen was on the verge of death. Maria, knife in hand, walked over to her mother and, in one swift movement, stabbed her. Carmen's scream of pain echoed through the house, but Maria did not stop. Her desire for revenge was stronger than any sense of guilt. The next morning, Maria's neighbors, worried about the screams they had heard the night before, decided to call the police. Upon arriving at the house, the police found a scene of horror. The lifeless bodies of Juan and Carmen lay on the floor, and Maria, knife in hand, sat in the living room, staring into space. The police began an exhaustive investigation to understand what had happened. They interrogated Maria, who confessed everything. She told them about Juan and his mother's betrayal, about her plan for revenge, and about how she had carried out her plan. The police, horrified by Maria's confession, arrested her and took her to the police station. Maria's trial was one of the most highly publicized in the history of Zaragoza. The city, shocked by the tragedy, followed every detail of the case with attention. Maria, represented by a renowned lawyer, pleaded guilty to the murders of Juan and his mother. Her confession, detailed and emotional, left everyone in the courtroom in shock. During the trial, Maria explained her version of events. She spoke about Juan and his mother's betrayal, about her pain and anger, and about her desire for revenge. Her testimony, although moving, was not enough to prevent a conviction. The judge, after hearing all the testimonies, found Maria guilty of double homicide and sentenced her to life in prison. Maria was transferred to a maximum security prison outside Zaragoza. Her life in prison was difficult, but Maria found a kind of peace in her confinement. She knew that what she had done was wrong, but she also knew that her pain and anger were real. In prison, Maria began receiving therapy, where she was able to process her emotions and understand the complexity of her actions. The tragedy had a profound impact on the community of Zaragoza. Juan, Maria, and Carmen's neighbors, friends and colleagues were shocked by what had happened. The once quiet and peaceful city was now marked by a tragedy that no one could forget. The story of Juan, Maria, and Carmen became a reminder of the dangers of betrayal and revenge. The city of Zaragoza, although trying to move on, could not forget the tragedy that had shocked its inhabitants. The story became a topic of conversation on the streets, in cafes and in homes, a constant reminder of what can happen when love and betrayal mix. In her prison cell, Maria reflected on her life and her actions. She knew what she had done was wrong, but she also knew that her pain and anger were real. In her moments of solitude, Maria thought about Juan and her mother, the happy times they had shared, and the pain she had caused. Maria was also thinking about her future, about the possibility of redemption and the hope of finding peace. She knew that her life would never be the same, but she also knew that she had the opportunity to learn from her mistakes and find a way to move forward. The story of Juan, Maria, and Carmen became the subject of a true crime documentary. The documentary, titled A Romance Between Husband and Mother-in-Law Ends in Tragedy, explored the events that led to the tragedy, the emotions and motives behind Maria's actions, and the impact of the tragedy on the community of Zaragoza. The documentary, directed by a renowned filmmaker, premiered at the Zaragoza Film Festival in December 2024. The film received positive reviews and became a box office hit, attracting the attention of viewers around the world. The story of Juan, Maria, and Carmen became a reminder of the dangers of betrayal and revenge, and a topic of conversation around the world. The documentary had a profound impact on the community of Zaragoza and the world. The story of Juan, Maria, and Carmen became a topic of conversation on social media, in the media, and in homes. The tragedy became a reminder of the dangers of betrayal and revenge, and a topic of reflection for everyone. In prison, Maria continued to receive therapy and work on her redemption. Although she knew she could never change the past, she also knew she had the opportunity to learn from her mistakes and find a way to move forward. Maria began to keep a journal, reflecting on her life, her actions, and her emotions. In her journal, Mary wrote about her pain, her anger, and her desire for revenge. She also wrote about her regret, her hope for redemption, and her desire to find peace. Mary knew that her life would never be the same, but she also knew that she had the opportunity to learn from her mistakes and find a way to move forward. Maria, though sentenced to life in prison, found a kind of peace in her confinement. She knew what she had done was wrong, but she also knew that her pain and anger were real. In prison, Maria continued to receive therapy and work on her redemption. She also began participating in rehabilitation programs, where she helped other prisoners process their emotions and find peace. Maria also began writing letters to Juan and Carmen's families, expressing her regret and her desire for redemption. Although she knew she could never change the past, she also knew she had the opportunity to learn from her mistakes and find a way to move forward.